Hello, Crime Scene Cleanup and Necrophiliacs Anonymous. You kill 'em, we drill 'em. How may I help you?
I'd like two on the rocks.
We prefer the term on
uh, right. Sorry.
ice. How
Ch-
are you?
chilled. Um,
Wait, was that your order or is that you?
so I got this new belt,
Oh, tell me more, Daddy.
a new kind of belt.
Oh. How many kinds of belts are there?
Well, there's one more. So somebody had the brilliant idea that what men's fashion needed were belts designed after zip ties.
Oh my God.
I'm not even I'm not even kidding.
To give you that just kidnapped feeling. What the hell?
No, it's a dress belt with a nice buckle, but got a ratchet mechanism ex- e- exactly like a zip tie, but with a
Yeah.
release.
Right.
Um, and I wore it for the first time today, and you know, I came home from work.
Yeah.
So I have this very weird thing that if I have this without even looking at the time, but when I decide to leave work and I catch a bus for part of the way home, if I pause, not pause it, but if I take the time to hit the head before going to the bus stop, I will miss that bus by half a block. Guaranteed.
Okay. Yeah.
Guaranteed. It will drive right past me. So I have learned to not do that. Or
Yeah.
so by the time I got home today, my bladder was so full
Fit to
and
pop.
fit to pop. And I get in there and I'm like, how the fuck do you release this belt? I can't get out of it. And I had done it a couple of times that day, and I'm going,
Yeah, you're
let me
leaving
out,
though.
let me
You're
out.
under pressure.
Right, a lot of
Oh my
pressure.
God.
And I succeeded in making it tighter.
Oh my God. So how long did it take you to figure out bra fastening?
Unfastening?
Yeah, like removing the hook and eye
Oh,
closure.
um, yeah, about a minute.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so you just need the proper motivation.
Well, I just needed to figure out I was just handling the release wrong on this belt. It was just, I thought it would go one direction and it didn't, and it came
Although part of
very
me feels
close.
feels compelled to mention that I think that's how kids Boy Scout belts work.
Oh, no, not, I mean, there,
Yeah.
there is a similarity, I will admit, but it's not a locking mechanism. I mean, it is, but it's got that slide friction and not a notch ratchet.
Well, that's true. Yeah, it's just little grabby teeth or something, but
Yeah.
weird to put that anyway. Yeah. So
I like the belt
belt.
still.
I'm glad, but now you know you need to be prepped for it.
Need more
That's why you need a
practice with that
loosen.
release. Yeah,
Mhm.
that mechanism. Don't want to be.
Still, I don't feel very sympathetic because as women, like we have to get out of the craziest crap to be able to go to the bathroom and
Well, who puts you into those things?
you know what? I don't admittedly we buy them, but nobody told me when I was in high school and those snap onesie bodysuit things were really all the rage.
Oh God, yeah, yeah.
Nobody mentioned
That you would
what
have to
the
pretty much
procedure was
undress to get out.
entirely. Yes, and God forbid you wore the adorable, overalls that all the girls were wearing in the early 90s. I mean, like really, it was like, ugh, you were supposed to make it easy to get out of our clothes, I thought, except if you want to go to
Mm,
the bathroom.
yeah.
So, yeah, but Not to mention corsets and all the other things, which we won't. So
No, no.
different kind of show.
What has been on your mind lately?
Oh my golly, I made it through the holidays. I lived. It was
The family lived?
everybody lived.
Yay!
Everybody who went into the holidays alive came out alive, and that, as far as I'm concerned, is a good outcome. That is success right there.
That is a good holiday. Nobody's arrested. No bail had to be
Yes.
posted.
Nobody even had harsh words or anything. I think it was just a case of, okay, we're all numb. Let's just get through this. But
Well,
no,
yeah, you've
so
had a lot of struggles this,
it's been a
especially
rough
the last
autumn.
half of the year. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a little tough. But you know what? I have come to some realizations,
Uh,
and
uh-oh.
we, well, Gary, I know, taking stock of my life and all that.
Jesus.
Yeah. Well, we've touched on a lot of things over the weeks of doing the podcast, and good relationships and bad relationships, and
Yeah, yeah.
what the point of our life is. And we're going to go straight into a heavy topic. Are you ready?
I'm strapped in.
Do you have a whiskey nearby? No.
Just
Um,
just
so,
just cider. Um,
oh, all right. Well, you
yeah,
take your chances.
hopefully it's enough.
Mm-hmm. It sounded like you were beeping to back up or something.
That was the
Um,
bottle.
oh, okay, gotcha. Making music. Okay. So no, but I not everybody listening knows this. I lost the man I loved in the fall. He died, and so the last few months I've been grieving a lot, and then of course my mother died, but which has been its own different flavor, but another layer of grief. And
Mhm.
there's been a lot of, of course, looking back on the relationships and what happened, and how things ended and all that. And sometimes your mind will play tricks with you about what
Mm.
really happened or didn't happen, or what somebody meant or didn't mean. Um, and it all came down to yesterday, me finally sort of telling my brain to shut up because none of that stuff mattered, because the overall result was that the changes that I went through are there
Yeah.
regardless. So it was this sort of, realization that I don't need to get attached to what the labels were, or what
Okay.
the plans were, or anything like that. That like those, it was those, the attachment to the outcomes, the plans that I had, the thoughts that I had, the dreams that I wanted fulfilled,
Right.
that those not getting done were so incredibly painful, but the end result is is the same. That what I've learned and grown from is in essence unchanged, regardless of the answers to any of those questions or whether or not those outcomes happened.
Well, yeah. I mean, any non-sociopath uh, would be changed by that.
Yeah. Well, it's a different realization for me because I stay in my head a lot of the time, and I there are a lot of questions I want answered, and when I don't have answers to the questions, I speculate. And
Sure.
different answers will, sometimes leave you feeling different ways. And I can get into a mood based on, kind of like when you wake up from a dream and somebody did something to you and you're mad at them for what they did to you in the dream. I can get myself in a mood over what I suppose may have been the answer without regard to what the answer really is. And since there are answers I cannot know, these people are dead, they're gone. There's no getting the questions answered. I have to let go of that attachment and really focus on what's important, which is just where I'm going and what I'm going to do moving forward, how it changed me.
Oh, so many things there. So many things. Um,
Yeah, sorry, I'm kind of feeling bad for our listeners right now, all two of them.
you and me.
Yeah, right. I feel very bad for us. All right.
Well, and then I have to go and listen to this all over again.
I know we have to. It's necessary.
um,
So,
but you're gonna, yeah, you. What I was gonna say is, if you're not a sociopath, you're gonna be changed by events,
yeah,
and you can, you can cling to those painful outcomes that you had in mind, and just let them just suffer with that,
yeah,
or not.
yeah. Well, or I can, linger in the what didn't happen,
Yeah,
the plans that were made that did not get fulfilled,
right.
and become well. And here was what it came down to is, we talked before about the walls that we all have, and the temptation right now is to put the walls back up. That I was hurt.
Because you were hurt.
Yeah, yeah, because of the hurt that I'm feeling right now, which of course, then would leave me out of the whole point of being a human, which we, decided is the connection. And I can't, that's not a healthy choice. So I
and
have to find a way back in.
and it's an interesting thing that I was contemplating earlier today, in fact, is that the brain is really good at generalizing, because
Yes.
that is very efficient for us as human
Yeah.
beings. um,
Absolutely.
but how does it how do you how does it sometimes it'll the example I was thinking of is, how does the brain generalize that, you know the difference between a stove will burn me versus a hot stove will burn me?
Sure. And I guess the place my brain immediately went in relation to my thing is, how do you tell the difference between, a poor connection will hurt me, whereas a good connection will enrich my life, even if I also get pain out of it.
Hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of people, when they're very hurt, will overgeneralize.
Yeah, love is bad. Love sucks.
Yeah,
Don't do
or whoever
that.
the opposite sex is, or they're awful,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
they're gonna hurt me.
absolutely. Mhm,
It and I'm thinking of, my original metaphor of of a stove.
mhm.
It's kind of reminds me of torture, right? So
Yeah.
if you're tortured enough,
Mhm.
or even a little bit maybe,
Yeah.
by an object,
Mhm.
the very object can cause you trauma. You can generalize,
Absolutely.
right, that an innocent object, innocent in other contexts,
Mhm.
could be very traumatic for you.
Yeah.
Is it safe? You remember that
I
from
have a friend.
Marathon Man?
Oh yes, I do. I have a friend who doesn't eat soup because the last night that she made soup in her marriage was one of the worst assaults that she suffered. Um,
Hmm.
and so they just don't eat soup. They don't make soup. But
How
it's one of
about
those things
that?
where,
It just
yeah,
got
right.
associated with that.
It did, and
Yeah,
it is, and soup is not such a valuable thing that they need to go through the challenge of making themselves participate in it. But there are other things that are way more important than soup.
sure.
We don't really have a choice to opt out of them. Or we do, but it's not a healthy choice.
Yeah, yeah. So many people who have these hurts in their emotional lives.
Yeah.
Um, and I've seen this many times, is they structure their lives and their people so that nobody will get near those spots,
Yes.
and they get very angry if somebody does.
Yeah. Very defensive.
Very defensive, very
Yeah.
upset, and very angry. Like, how did you not know to not touch that spot? Like,
Yes. Yeah.
what are you talking about? It's just soup.
Yeah, right? Like, I didn't know that serving soup was going to be a problem for you and that it was going to create a panic attack.
Right.
Yeah. And
Rather than
I
trying to deal with it and get
mhm.
over the thing, whatever the thing is,
Yeah.
get over the trauma, get over the pain, and heal from it, they spend enormous amounts of effort and energy and time building up and structuring every aspect of their lives to never ever touch the spot.
Yeah. And that's it's and of course we understand, or at least I do, I don't know about you, that people have to prioritize, and maybe in a couple of years soup will be a priority and that will
Hmm.
be addressed, but right now it's not. But there are things that we can't just let the defenses stand.
I think
There's
let's let soup serve as a metaphor
Yes. There you go.
from this point on, and not
Okay.
that specific example,
Right. Yes.
because I think it's a great metaphor.
Yeah. But I don't want that person in my life to be upset that we use them as an example. So yes, soup is now just symbolic.
It's a great little metaphor for things
That we avoid.
that we overgeneralize and then
Yeah.
avoid.
Yeah. It's
Uh,
true. And so I mean when we have those things though, I mean I'm one of those people that it's not that if you tell me I can't do it, I have to do it. It's more that if I realize I don't want to do it, or that I am scared of it for a reason that is not, to my way of thinking, legitimate, I have to do it.
to show that you can.
Yeah, because it bothers me so much that I can't. Like, so there are a couple of things that doesn't apply to. One of them is skydiving and jumping off
Oh.
of high things. Because and I other people can enjoy it. I know you've done it as a family. That's beautiful and lovely, and I can still think you're an idiot. But it's just it's one of
There's,
those things.
trust me, there
I
are
don't need to
lots
do
of
it.
better reasons to think I'm an idiot besides skydiving.
But it's on the list.
Okay.
But like, so that's one thing I won't do. And there are other things I'm nervous about, like swimming in shark infested waters and stuff
Mm.
like that. But at the same time,
Not
like I also have
entirely irrational, no.
well, I mean that's how I feel about those two things. Like,
Sure.
people do die skydiving. It's not
It's not.
completely outside the realm of possibility. But also
No.
I just don't have a need to do it. Those are two things that I look at and I'm like, no, those are legitimate fears. I can let those stand. But there are other things that I have a horrible fear of sloths. Um, and it
which
is a source of
which I get great pleasure of
I
from
know
teasing you
everybody
about.
does. Everybody does. My children delight in like bringing stuffed animals home and tagging me in videos on Facebook and all kinds of stuff. But I recognize that it is a ridiculous fear. So like when I went out to get Christmas wrapping paper this year, I had heard that Target had sloth decorations and wrapping paper and stuff.
No.
They did. So when
No.
I went
Oh my
when
God.
I went they didn't. But I was gonna come home with sloth wrapping paper just to be like, it's not that big a deal. It's a freaking sloth. Like, yes, I have this fear and they creep me out and I don't really want to like even just the thought of one being anywhere near me really squeezes me out. But it's a silly fear, and of course I will. I've gone to
Because
zoos and I've been with my kids around the sloths because it's
the
something I need to work on.
the odds of you actually encountering a sloth in the wild are pretty close to zero.
Well, the reason I'm scared of sloths is because I encountered one unexpectedly in an aviary. I turned
What? What the
around.
hell was it doing in there?
Well, sometimes apparently they mix those things up. And there's a zoo in Nashville that when I used to go take my preschool class there for field trips, one time, I mean, I didn't know that there were sloths in the aviary. Otherwise, I would have looked. I wasn't scared of them before that, but I would have paid attention. But I turned around, and there was one right there, and freaked me the fuck out. So anyway, but like that's a fear I recognize I have to work with. I cannot avoid, the all the commercials on television and everything like that. Like I can't turn off the TV every time a commercial comes on with a sloth. So I work on that. And it's the same with other things. When I realized I was scared, in the context of my divorce, to be on my own, to have to, manage all my own finances and make enough money for myself and my children,
Hmm.
that was a terrifying thought. And it was almost enough to stop me. But because it was almost enough to stop me, it was like, well, that's not okay. Then obviously that is something that needs to be dealt with.
Yeah,
But, so in a way, I have those things, and I, 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 I think that's rare to have that sort of attitude. I think that a lot of
I would
people,
agree with that.
yeah, a lot of people are much happier to remain in denial. So being up in my head has its benefits.
Agreed. Um,
Yeah,
and I overcame a 10-year phobia of dogs starting from when I was in kindergarten.
that's right. You told us that story.
Yeah, by figuring it out. I figured it out myself.
And now, I mean, look at you, like dogs are your favorite thing. I never would have
Yeah,
expected that you would have had a phobia.
no, because I fixed it.
Yeah.
And then
Don't
like
expect me to be
a little-
hugging any sloths anytime soon, though.
and then 20 years, 30 years later, I read about the same technique that I figured out to help myself is this radical new technique for helping phobias. And I'm like, come on, that can't be new. I did that when I was 15.
What was it? What did you do?
It was very simply, I um, became aware that there were situations where I was afraid of dogs and situations where I wasn't. And I
Oh,
thought, if I pursue more of those situations where I'm not afraid of dogs and spend time
yeah,
in those situations, that
yeah.
could very well help.
Huh.
And
Well,
it
yeah.
did.
Funny. Huh.
And now that's a thing.
I mean, and that's a thing for everything, like anything that you're scared of is, put it in a non-threatening context,
Right.
and then away you go. Yeah. Well, and that's, but that's fair. We've learned a lot about psychology in the last 50 years or so that we didn't know before. That's way more accurate than the crap that they came up with 100 years
Oh
ago.
my God. Just a little bit. Just a little bit.
Yes.
So attachment to outcomes. I don't think we ever really have we ever really defined that for people.
No, I don't know that we have. Go for it.
So Buddha says attachment is the source of all suffering.
Yeah.
And now note that it doesn't say so never get attached to anything or anyone. It,
Right.
it just says be warned. it's
That's what hurts.
it's the warning label on life.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you get attached, it's going to hurt
Yeah.
sooner or later
Yeah.
because
And I think it's almost just a good way of saying, so be thoughtful about
right,
what is worth the pain.
right.
Do you want to feel that way over your car or your job? Or do you want to only feel that way over people?
And
Um,
only certain people,
yeah.
truthfully.
Yes, oh, absolutely. Oh my gosh. I mean, if nothing else has done it this holiday season, has reiterated and backed up my attitude that no, I don't have to maintain relationships with family simply because they're family. Um, that some relationships are not, some attachments are not worth the damage that they cause. Um, and it doesn't mean even that I don't see those people anymore. I just have to not be attached to what our relationship is or what I get out of it.
Yeah, so attachment to outcomes is, when you take a when you get emotionally involved in a specific result,
Right.
and this can affect us in every walk of life, every area of
Mhm.
our lives. I mean, how many times have you seen or in real life or in the media, somebody's got some big event planned. a wedding, a graduation, a birthday, whatever, and one little thing goes off the rails, and they say, "Oh, the whole thing is ruined."
So I have a good story about this one, which actually is kind of for me a little bit of a, oh look, I was actually like doing baby steps way back when my ex and I got married. Um, we don't stand on a whole lot of ceremony. We had a lot of fun with our wedding. Um, and one of the things we did was we had, like we planned our wedding cake, and it was kind of the bride's cake and the groom's cake both smooshed together, and it was this gorgeous thing. And we had our reception at a hotel, and they were clearing the Mary Kay convention out before us, and they were bringing all of our reception stuff in, and they dropped champagne flutes on the cake,
Uh,
and the champagne flutes shattered.
uh,
And so
into the
there was
cake.
yes, into like the top two
Oh,
layers of the cake. And
oh
so they had to
no.
remove the top two layers of the cake, and they're like, trying to dress it up with flowers and fix what was messed up and get new champagne flutes and everything. And the poor event manager comes out to tell us. And he is like, you can tell this guy's just shaking in his boots, and he comes to tell us, and both my ex and I burst into laughter because
Because
yeah, because it was one of those things. It was
I
like, that is hilarious, and what do you do? And
right,
crazy shit happens. And he was so scared that like I was
yeah.
gonna be bridezilla and go off on him, and it was like, what's the big fucking deal? It's a cake, you know.
But
It's
they
like a
ruined your day.
right, yeah, no,
No,
mine, mm-mm. But it was, yeah, it was one of those things where it was like, no, I didn't need everything then to be perfect. There's not a lot that I need to be perfect.
yeah.
Um, But
But
I'll tell you
people,
this.
but go ahead.
I was just going to say, here's a much harder outcome, though. Let's say a relationship with a parent
Yeah.
where, people will go through this pattern again and again of, man, if I just do the right thing, if I just say the right thing, maybe after this life change, maybe after I change jobs, maybe after I have a kid, maybe after I get married, maybe, whatever, I'll get the approval. I'll get
Mm,
the parent that I always needed.
yeah.
And you cannot
No.
stay happy if you are attached to that person filling the hole. Once again, we come back to that hole, but just that attachment to the outcome of having the perfect parent, of having, and not even the perfect parent, but just the parent you want. Like
Right.
that's not, or the family you want.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. It's not going to work out the way you want it to just because you want it to. You have to let things be what they are, and attach to the things that are enriching
Which
and
is,
that are worth the pain.
accepting things as they are. The clinical term for this is radical acceptance, which is literally and simply fully and completely accepting reality for what it is and not what we wish it was. And so
Uh,
those two things go hand in glove.
and this is interesting because the term radical acceptance is one that I heard by way of parenting and this
Mm,
unschooling thing that we've gotten into, and with
yeah.
our thing is called radical unschooling. But it is that same idea of accept your children for who they are, for the skills they have, the talents they have, all of that, and accept not only that, but that who they become has nothing to do with you. And not nothing, but it's not about you. And you don't get, like you were talking about, you don't get to take credit for your kids. Like you,
Mm,
whether my children become carpenters or cab drivers or astronauts or engineers or sex workers or whatever,
hmm.
the the way for me to maintain that connection in a way that is most enriching to us both is to not be attached to that outcome.
Right. And
So how do you think you would feel if one of your kids was a sex worker?
I think I would um, have a long, in-depth discussion on why and
Sure.
how they got into that and what they're looking for from it and why they're doing it and how they're doing it so that I could understand. And if there was a place for me to lend a hand to alter their circumstances or their options, um, I would want to find that out. Um, so I would, I would not be judgmental of that. I would
Sure.
be looking for information and looking for ways to offer support in whatever way that was needed.
So your assumption would not be that the way you feel about it, or that the way society feels about it would probably be a better
Yeah.
um, concern, is the only correct or accurate depiction of that choice. And
No.
right, so yeah, but I mean, that's what I would say is that you wouldn't be attached to the idea that your child was making this choice for this one reason, and that was the only possibility.
And
You allow
I
for,
would not even, I would not assume anything about it, hopefully.
yeah,
And
yeah,
certainly not that it had anything to do with me,
sure,
unless I was told that.
right,
you know,
yeah. I mean,
Uh,
that's fair.
unless
That's
she,
more fair, I think, than most parents are.
unless she said, because you did X, Y, and Z, this is why I'm in
Right,
this spot. I like,
exactly,
well,
exactly.
shit, hon, I'm sorry.
Well, and besides that, your kids are old enough that you can be like, well, here's the name of a therapist, and quit blaming me. But, um, but I mean, but that's, I mean, I think that's so much more than most parents give their children. I mean, most kids, I don't think, get radical acceptance of their complete personhood and their choices and their experience. Oh, I mean, not even kid. I mean, I would go so far as to say most people, just in all of our relationships, we don't get. I mean, who do you find in your life that gives you that radical acceptance? I look around at my, it's really only my very close circle of maybe 4 friends and my children.
Yeah, yeah, it's a very small circle. It's a
Yeah.
because um, that kind of that kind of radical acceptance is, well, it's hard for people to do for themselves, first of all. And I think you
Yeah.
do have to do it for yourself before you can do it for anyone else.
Yeah, and I think that even applies to children because I think children start off from a place of radical acceptance, and it's only taught out of them.
Quite possible. Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. So, in order to even get into the areas where radical acceptance would be needed requires a huge amount of trust that flows both directions so that you can start to open up into those areas with these friends. And it's just a rare thing I've found. And it's a wonderful thing when you do have it. And the friends that I am able to do that with are very, very valuable to me.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And I'm curious, like now the wheels are spinning in my head, and I'm like, well, what makes those relationships? Taking children out of it for the
Sure,
moment, because
let's
I
do
think our
that.
children are
Uh,
predisposed to trust us, because we have kept them alive, even if we've done it grudgingly. Um, I don't mean that ugly. I'm just
I
saying,
know it. I
some
know what
kids
you
give
mean.
their parents a lot more credit than the parents deserve.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so let's just, just looking
It's a
at adult
different.
relationships.
Yeah, because kids just are generally a different dynamic.
Yeah, they really are. So just looking at adult relationships, like I'm thinking, the friends, I have one, two, three female friends, and then the gentleman I lost, and then you, and it's like those, that handful of people that I really trust. And what it comes down to usually is what we've touched on before, is that when I do or say the ugly thing, the thing that I've been told in the past is not okay to let show,
Yeah.
you'll see that thing and you're like, oh, come out to play. Like it's
Right.
this. It is that radical acceptance of you have those shadows. Oh my God, I have those shadows too.
Right.
Um, and then as well, and it even applies, I guess, almost most when I am angry or we are angry at each other, myself and those people. Like you and I had a miscommunication on a phone conversation. I don't know, was it last week or whatever? I don't even remember. It was all such a fog of just
Yeah.
anger. But I was, you said you were agreeing with me, and I was like, I really don't think you are. and, and I, honest to God, like yelled at you and told you to shush several times, and at one point told you I was like a hair's breadth from hanging up on your ass,
Yeah.
and which is something I don't do. And but you, God bless you, you just laughed. And it was, it was a little bit like, don't laugh at me, but at the same time, it was like, I am so glad that I can just, you know,
Do
snap at
that.
you.
Yeah.
Yes, that I can snap at you and be frustrated and whatever I'm feeling, and you just take it in stride. And there was no, like, you didn't even the next day, like, what the hell was wrong with you? Like, there was none of that. It
There
was
was
just like,
nothing.
yeah, bad day. Yeah,
Yeah.
no,
Well,
not a big deal.
no
And
big
and
deal.
my other friends as well. Like, it's not even when we're angry at each other, but just when we have grievances. When one of us said something, 3 days ago that it's like, you know what? Okay, this has been gnawing at me. And I need to hash it out with you. Like we do, and there's
Yeah. Yeah.
no
Exactly.
defensiveness. There's always a willingness to either, whether it's we just listen to the thing or it's like, oh, we have a problem. Okay, let's solve that together. Like,
Here's something that and I've been thinking about the same kinds of things, and I find that assumptions get in the way so much of the time.
yeah,
Um, and I recently went through an experience where assumptions were, caused a complete rift with somebody,
yeah, yeah,
and they didn't. And I offered to talk to this person and clear things up, and they didn't want to. They
yeah.
didn't
That's
want to.
tough.
They did not want to get new information.
No, they were more comfortable with their assumptions.
Yes, and I've come to think that when your assumptions line up with beliefs that relate to your identity, that we are
Oh yeah,
very protective of those assumptions.
absolutely.
So in
Yeah,
this
what's a
case,
connection in the face of your identity? you know, like I'll drop that asshole. At least I don't have to examine myself.
well, it's kind of true.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
absolutely it is. There are times when it is more uncomfortable to face, what the mirror that that person happens to be holding up to us, and possibly not even through any intention of their own.
right.
But it's just more uncomfortable to look in that mirror than it is to say, you know what, you take your mirror and go home. I'm done.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah.
And that
And I
was
guess that's,
that was the case, and it was kind of sad for me to have that just completely fall apart, and
hmm
and not have any interest in putting it back together.
and that's tough too, to not take it personally, to not, attach your own self-worth to the fact that this person, in a way that probably had nothing, not nothing maybe, but very, very little to do with you actually as a person,
Hmm.
that choice still resulted in pain for you because the attachment that you had,
Well,
you
the
know,
connection, yeah, the
the
connection
connection
that
was
I had built.
lost, and
Hmm.
or even the outcome of, having a give and take, a reciprocal relationship with this person.
Yeah,
Um, when that's lost, then, but yeah, it can be hard not to take it personally. Of like, whoa, okay, I wasn't worth that work.
yeah.
But you
So,
can also get your whole life wrapped up in that unworthiness. My father is
I,
still hurting from the fact that his alcoholic mother wasn't willing to quit drinking for him.
well, yeah, that's hanging on to something for a while, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it is, and there are things that it's just you have to choose to let them go. Sometimes you have to choose, look at it honestly, and then say, you know what, I'm going to decide that that didn't have anything to do with me.
Well, that's the four agreements, um,
Right.
which
Yes.
I'm not gonna read those. I'm not gonna go into them. You can look them up. The four
Yeah.
agreements, very short, take you
But
a minute and a
excellent.
half
Yeah.
to read, but
Yeah.
very good stuff to live by. And one of which,
Yeah.
da da da, make no assumptions.
Yeah. 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 It's true. But I find myself very frequently having to remind myself that, just because something affected me, a decision or whatever, just because it affected me doesn't mean it had anything to do with me.
Sure.
And I think that's a hard one for us to get. I remember, I don't know how many times I told my kids, just because you're angry doesn't mean anybody did anything wrong.
Mm. Yeah. I remember I remember having conversations with my daughters when they'd be fighting, and we'd take them one at a time and say, "Explain why you're upset without mentioning your sister." And they'd be like,
Oh, interesting.
"But she." No, you can't say you
Nope.
can't do that.
That's
But
so cool.
because we were trying to get them not to blame,
Yeah, yeah. Which
and it
again
was
is so funny
very difficult for them to do.
and so completely opposite from what most people do, which is, in my family growing up, I won't say we were encouraged to tattle, but
Mm.
it always worked out just fine for us when we did. Like that
You get more of
spirit.
the behavior you reward. Yep.
Yeah, well, and that spirit of, um, just holding each other to standards rather than ourselves.
Ah,
That was much more the focus in my family, was hold everybody else to your standards. Don't worry so much about whether or not you're living up to that. Which of course I came out of with the complete opposite of, I can't do much about anybody else, but I can make sure I'm acting right.
yeah, yeah. Well,
And
that's really all you can do. I mean, you don't have the illusion of control. I mean, it's a complete hallucination. Any idea of controlling other people. I mean,
yeah,
you can physically restrain them,
yeah,
but we're talking about non-felony
yes,
type of
yes,
things.
non-assault, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and I found that also sometimes that's all you have in the end, is just the assurance that you behaved in a way that you can live with. Um,
yeah,
and yeah, yeah, the control, whether or not somebody else did something, and it's so hard to know what somebody else's motivation was. Like, you can try to manipulate. Of course, the two best ways are fear and love, and you can try to use those things to manipulate somebody's behavior,
hmm
but there's no guarantee that just because they behaved the way you wanted them to, that there was a strengthening of your connection.
Oh, let me tell you that can backfire.
Yeah. See, children. Yes. No, go ahead.
No, no. I mean, hopefully this was only something that I experienced and didn't pass on. But
Sure.
you
Yeah.
know, my
You were
mother.
a children once.
I was a children, and I had a manipulative mother,
Yeah.
highly manipulative, and you know that that dual-edged sword of love and fear
Mhm.
was wielded constantly.
Yeah.
I mean, and indiscriminately at times.
Yeah.
And there was no attempt to know the children as people.
Mm.
We were props in her
Yeah.
little personal drama, and we better play our parts right.
Yeah.
And if we didn't, it's because we didn't love her enough or whatever.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah.
So yeah, that's
People suck. No, wait, that's not where I'm going. I'm going the other direction.
um, so
So,
so oh, what did you have in mind?
no, nothing. Go.
So did you have a lot of arguments in your family growing up? A lot of fighting?
uh, yeah, yeah. There was a lot of
Was it parents? Was it parents to kids, kids to kids?
yes.
All of it above?
Yeah. Yeah, it really was. Like my mom, I don't know that my mother ever initiated an argument with children or an altercation with any of us children, but my parents argued a lot. My dad, I mean, you never knew. I would listen for my father to come home and try to tell by the way he closed his car door what kind of mood he was going to be when he came in the house. Um,
Hmm.
so I mean, he could literally come in yelling. There was really no way to know. So yeah, there was a lot of yelling, and I remember, my parents would go out, and my oldest brother, who was 6 years older than me, would babysit, and I remember one time him chasing our middle brother like all through the house, and them having a big argument and stuff. And yeah, no, I know I had arguments with my middle brother, and yeah, not such a pleasant house. Mhm.
And so there's a concept that as children in our environment growing up, we have two choices with the environment, and that is that we accept it or we reject it. And unless we consciously reject any aspect of our environment growing up, the default is to accept it.
Correct. Yes.
So, do you think you were more of an accepting or rejecting of that part of your environment, the fighting?
Rejecting. Yeah. When I got to be enough of a young adult that I was trying to figure out what I wanted from my relationships, one of the top things was, well, I mean, we've talked about this, not fighting, like, and not, and like arguing, discussing is okay, but not fighting, not being hurtful,
Mm.
not essentially sending me into fight or flight. I guess to me that's what it comes down to,
Okay.
is either you perpetuate that pattern of I'm going to remain in this cycle of going in and out of fight or flight mode, and some people do. I mean, some people really, that they begin to thrive off of it,
Yeah.
until it damages them. But I went the opposite direction of no, I would like for things to be as steady and non-threatening as possible, and peace at all costs.
Mm.
Even to the point of sublimating. Like I used to kind of brag that my husband, my ex, and we didn't fight.
Yeah.
Um, but I've mentioned that part of the reason for that was that if I was ever upset about something, I would just go away until I talked myself out of being upset. So, but that was a priority for me. Peace was an absolute priority for me, to the point that that's what changed my parenting. When I spanked and I was so miserable and unhappy with myself, and the only way I could get my kids to do anything was yelling because I didn't have any other skills. Like that it was so uncomfortable that I radically 180 degrees changed my parenting so that I could have a peaceful home.
Yeah.
And even my divorce, I mentioned, like, I got out of my marriage before it got ugly so that we could have a peaceful divorce for our children. That is absolutely, it's no longer my number one priority. Now
Yeah.
my number one priority is honesty,
Mhm.
but it's right on up there. Like, if I can't have, I will have honesty above all, but if there's somebody with whom honesty always requires strife, I'm way less likely to stay in a relationship with them than somebody with whom I can have honesty and peace.
I don't know how that would be the case, um, but it's certainly possible.
Which
Be-
part?
honesty and strife. Those things
If
don't.
I was honest, if I was honest with my father on a consistent basis, there would be a great deal of strife.
Oh, because he's not accepting, and so.
Exactly.
But that's.
Yeah. Right. Yes, I
But
mean,
because he's not accepting, you're not going to do that. So
right, and I default to peace.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's again, that's a connection that's not enriching for me, so it's not worth the trouble of being like, hey,
Yeah.
you can have honesty or you can not have me at all. It's like, no, I'm going to keep this connection, but I'm not going to have an attachment to its outcome.
Right.
So, yeah. But anyway, go ahead with what you were saying.
Um. it- it- the how do you think? So how do you like to disagree in a relationship? What's a good way to have a fight, a disagreement?
Um, I guess the first thing to know is that most things, the things that I really find like deeply upsetting, you're not going to know about it probably for a few days. Because it's remarkable that the times I've been so proud of myself emotionally
Hmm.
have been the times when I have immediately expressed my feelings about a situation because I don't do that.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
I just take it in and I'm like, okay, roll along with it and then later feel it. So the times when I can feel something right away are pretty incredible. But um so yeah, I usually am very like I work it around in my head. Why do I feel this way? Why might this person be doing this? What are all sides of the situation? So that I already have like as many of the answers as I can figure out. And
Hmm.
then, I mean, it took me, I was upset with my ex-husband about something for like at least 2 weeks
What?
before I finally, well, recently, because it was one of those things where it was like he said something and it kind of rubbed me the wrong way, but I blew it off. And then
Okay.
a few days later, I was still a little bothered.
Mm.
But I was trying to articulate why. And like it took me, and then after like a week and a half, I had figured out exactly what the problem was, but I couldn't figure out how to approach him with it. And so then it took me a couple of more days before I had made a plan. And then I went to him just by the way, hey, we need to have a talk sometime. And then the next night he was like, well, is this a
Did you
good time
just
to talk?
did you just leave it at that? Oh my God.
Yes, I did. I
Oh,
totally did. I'm such a
that's
bitch.
so cruel. So cruel.
You should have seen the look in his eye.
He
But
looked like he was
the
going to his death, I'm sure.
no, because we were just gonna have a conversation. I don't do the
Oh,
crazy, scary shit. Remember?
the we need to talk. That's
Yeah,
that's the
which
words.
with
That's a
me
different
actually just
words.
means, well, no, but with me it just means we need to talk. Which I grant you can be threatening, um, but no, so the next night he was like, well, he got home early from his shift and I was taking care of the kids and he was like, well, is this a good time? And I said, sure. And he sat down and all of my carefully laid plans, I threw them out the window and said, so here's the thing I'm bothered about this. And I was very direct and laid it out and we talked it out. And 15 minutes later, I was good and it was all handled. And even in the
and
depths,
he was wrecked.
no, he was
No.
fine. I mean,
I,
no, but he's,
you know.
yeah, I know you're joking, but God love him. For better or worse, the obliviousness means that he is able to let a lot of things roll off his back. He's just like, oh, I fucked that up. Sorry. Okay, better luck next time. Um, but but even in the hardest part of our marriage, when I would have things that I had to say that I really didn't want to, and I was dreading them, we still approached it the same way, except that because of I have a diagnosis of complex PTSD, and because of how scared my body was, it was kind of sad. I would be like, okay, we need to talk, but I would have to go get in the bed and get under the covers and curl up in a ball because I would start to feel like I was freezing. All of the blood would, leave
Whoa.
my limbs and go to my core and like
Whoa.
I mean literally my teeth would chat because I was so scared of the confrontation because in my family if you growing up, if there was a confrontation, it was gonna get ugly, and I was going to be scared for my
Survival.
health. Yeah. I
Hmm.
mean, not that my father was ever truly, from an adult perspective, truly in danger of hurting us. A lot of, killing
Well,
us. A
but
lot
there's
of
a
people
lot
have
of
much worse.
survival
But
has a lot of
yes,
implications.
yes, exactly. And from a child's perspective, it was a matter of, is this person going to take care of me if I don't please them?
Right.
So yeah, so my body reacted in such a way that I was terrified of the confrontation. But even so, we would just sit in the bed and have a conversation.
Mm.
I don't generally fight.
Yeah.
That's just not something I do. I'm not. The That's why it was so upsetting when we had kids and I became a yeller, because it was like, oh, no, 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 I'm not doing this. This is not what I do.
Yeah. Yeah. But
So
that, as you said at the very beginning,
yeah.
we yell and we
Mhm.
spank when we don't know what else to do.
Yeah, I didn't have any other skills, and it took a long time. The pendulum swung the other way to where my kids were in charge of the house for a little while. That thing that everybody says not to do. It was like, well, you know what? In order to find a happy medium, because right now I'm in charge of the house, but I'm doing it badly.
Mm.
I'm doing a poor job of it. I'm not being a good leader or example to my children. I'm dysfunctional. So I had to let it swing to the other side, where these, innocent but self-absorbed and self-centered children were having a lot more control over themselves
Yeah.
than was probably healthy for them, but it was healthier than me being in such control. So, and then we came back to the center. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And
it is.
one of the things that as adults you don't realize about children, because you're never really very, or at least very rarely, consciously aware of it as a child.
Hmm.
But when you're born and you come out into the world, all you know is you. That's
Yeah.
that's all you've ever been exposed to before that moment is you. And so there's a very serious center of the universe mentality for children, because this is all they really know.
Well, I mean, I think we all have that mentality all the way through our lives. It's just that the universe gets bigger.
Yeah, maybe so. But
I mean,
the thing is that children think that because they're at the center, everything that happens is because of them,
yes.
when it
And
really isn't so much of the time. And
well, but again,
and
see, I
take
think
and
that
they
carries through.
yeah, and the kids just take that onto themselves without anybody
Hmm.
saying
Yes.
anything.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. And I definitely did that as a child. But yeah, no, it's not a conscious thing. Oh, I have the word for it in my head, and I can't bring it up. But yeah, where you take that on as you caused
Internalized.
that. Thank you. Yes, perfect. But yeah, that internalization of all the things that happen in your life, if unless you have parents and other adults who take pains to let you know
Right.
that that it is not about you, chances are, and I know my children have absorbed, certain things. I mean, I know my daughter used to watch my face, and if she saw that I, had a scowl on my face, she would, try to figure out what she had done wrong. And I had to become conscious of the look, and even that she was watching me, and occasionally say something like, I'm not angry, like I would be buckling her into her car seat and have a scowl on or whatever. And she'd be like, you mad, mommy? And I would say, no, I'm not mad. Why? And I would realize I was scowling, and it would be like, oh, no, sweetie, I was just thinking about this thing or whatever, and that's the look that got on my face. It had nothing to do with you. Um,
Yeah.
but a lot of people, I think, don't have the awareness as well of other people's cues that I have, because for me it was a survival skill. So
Right.
I pay a lot of attention to that kind of thing and to how people are reacting to me. And
Hmm.
I take great pains to tell my children that, hey, this way I'm behaving has absolutely nothing to do with you, and a lot of that is because growing up, when you're listening for the car door to slam so that
Mm-hmm.
you know to take cover,
Right.
it's important to me that my children know if the car door slams and I'm angry, I'm just angry, and that's I'm not going to ask that you be around me. I'm not going to say that you have to go away from me. Like what you want to do about it is your choice. I think that was the hard part as a kid is that I was held hostage to it. And
Yeah.
it's hard not to internalize something when you are made to feel that you are a part of it.
Right. Right. Or
So
yes, and some parents, so I've heard, go out of their way to put that responsibility onto their children.
yes, I know that I have done it, and noticed myself doing it and had to, say otherwise. When you're upset about something that your spouse did and you just had a fight with them and then you're trying to get everybody into the car and one of your kids forgets their jacket or whatever and it's, oh my God, go get it. We're late already.
Right.
And you're late because you were fighting with your spouse. Like that's what you're so angry about, and that is what you were late, why you were late, and it is all your fault. But boy, you can just put a little bit of that on your kid, and yeah, they did forget their
Yeah,
jacket,
spread
and they
that
weren't fully
around. Spread
prepared.
that around.
Exactly. But that kid is going to take it as, whoa, look how out of control my parent is. Look how angry I made them. All I did was forget my jacket. Oh my God,
I
I
didn't think it
can't
was
do
that
that
big a
to them
deal.
again. Yeah, and I must really be a shitty human being for
Hmm.
forgetting my jacket because I made my parent feel that way. Like you have to
Yeah.
again be able to detach a certain amount and say, I'm angry right now and I'm just angry and I know we have to interact, but I'm going to be angry, but it has nothing to do with you,
The
you
second
know.
most important three words to use with your children and
It's
with
not
your
you.
partner, I was wrong.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Do you know what I did to my daughter on Christmas Day?
No, you made her. Did you make her cry?
No, no. I cried. No, my children are wonderfully resilient, but no, so Christmas Day was really, really hard for me. We
Yeah.
had first Christmas morning without my mom, and then I came back to the house and we hung out for the day, my ex and the kids and I. And I had been like I had been counting down the days, because like you would ask me how I was doing, and I'd be like 5 days left. I was counting down the days until Christmas was over.
Hmm.
And so, like, as the end of the day was getting closer and I was going to be able to go to my apartment, I was getting more and more pent up. And I could feel myself like a volcano about to blow. And my ex had fallen asleep on the couch. And I had made dinner, and then I had made an apple pie that turned out to be not cooked all the way through, and I threw it out and like I had done all this stuff and I'm getting ready to leave. I am minutes from walking out the door and my daughter asked me to scoop her some ice cream. And I'm like, okay, yeah, fine, I can do that. And I'm scooping the ice cream and I pulled the garbage bag out with the apple pie and the garbage bag started to tip over and she jumped to try to catch it and she missed it. She didn't get to it in time. And the bag, tipped over and stuff fell on the floor and I'm like, oh my God. And I walked over there and I'm on my knees and I'm cleaning stuff up off the floor and I'm starting to get teary eyed. And my daughter says, Mommy, I'm so sorry I didn't catch the bag. And
Oh
I
God.
know, I know. And I said, no, baby, that's not it. It's just I've had a horrible day and I'm really emotional and I just need to get the hell out of here. And then I was like, you just told your daughter you had a horrible day on Christmas. On
Yeah.
Christmas.
And you want to get away from her.
And you need to get the hell out of the house where your children are.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. And sat
Um.
I sat there for about 10 seconds. And like and all this time I've been trying to hold the emotion in, which is something I have to do with my family of birth, but it's not something I usually try to do around my children. I want them to see my emotions. But I was in the, just hold it in kind of place. And so I stopped and I just kind of let myself get weepy and I looked at her and I said, Sweetie, I'm so sorry, that is not true. I said, I have not had a horrible day. It has been a lovely Christmas. that it's my first Christmas without Grandma, and I have had a really, really hard time with all my feelings, and I just want to go be alone for a little while. And she looked at me and she said, "That's okay. Do you need a hug?" And it was
Oh,
like, oh my God. But yeah, to be able to stop right then and realize what I had said and that it wasn't her fault and that even though I had all these feelings and yes, I did need to get the hell out of there, that I had to make sure that she knew it was because of my feelings and what was going on in me. And
yeah.
it had nothing to do with her or my how I felt about my time with them. So, but it's hard. It's hard to do that and realize that and to be okay with the fact that I cried, telling her that because I really didn't want to. I wanted to get out and I wanted to go cry all by myself. Um, but yeah, I mean, like I am not willing to walk out of that house and have my daughter thinking that, because she didn't catch the garbage bag,
Oh, can you
yeah,
imagine?
I know, but I know also from having been a child in that situation that that could easily have been what had happened.
Yeah. And
That she,
and
yeah,
and she, consciously or not,
mhm,
may have that could have colored that day for the rest of her life. That one
yeah,
little, that one tiny little moment when the garbage
yep,
fell over,
mhm.
you know,
That every bit of joy we had gotten out of that day
was
and how
gone.
hard we worked was gone, and it had been a horrible day.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and how that ties into attachments to outcomes and how we talked about,
yeah,
you know, oh, the day was ruined. And some people would have said that, oh, bag spilled over and that ruined the whole fucking day. Like, really? You had no
right.
fun up to that point.
Yeah. And yet
Really?
I could have allowed that. I could have allowed that to be the thing that I just broke over. And I could have allowed it to be the perception that that was what broke me
Yeah,
and not that it was everything leading up to that point that had nothing to do with that moment.
right. Well, and my point was
Yeah.
not that that moment had, um, you know, it's so many of these attachment to outcome things that upset people when they're looking for perfection, when they're attached to
Yeah.
the specific way things are going to go, and how very specific it can be. Bridezilla is a perfect example.
Mhm.
Um, and if one thing goes wrong, it changes their retroactively changes how they perceive everything that came before it.
Mhm. Well, and so here's like, a mind fuck for you is that I could have allowed that moment with my daughter to make me feel horrible. Like to be like, "Oh my God, look what I
Just
did. I
one more
ruined it
thing.
all."
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Oh
That I
yeah,
could
yeah.
have allowed it to be the thing that ruined Christmas, that could have ruined Christmas for me.
Hmm.
Whether it was uh, more so not even that I had that moment with her, but that I broke and that I cried. And instead, like knowing that I did that I fixed that and I let myself be vulnerable is actually even though I would have preferred if I had the choice, I would have preferred not to have had that upset and that, harsh words and have had to have fixed it. But I'm not going to let that make it be a bad day. I'm going to let that be a wonderful sort of moment of connection and
Won't it be
um,
interesting in 5, 10 years to ask her about that?
yeah, if she remembers it
If she
or
remembers it at
how
all.
she thinks of it. Yeah, and
And
if
if she,
so, how
oh
she saw
yeah,
it.
yeah, because it might be, you might find that it was a very meaningful moment for her too.
Yeah. Or maybe not at all. The most
Or yeah,
traumatic moment in my childhood, the most traumatic thing I ever witnessed that happened to my big brother,
yeah,
he doesn't remember it.
yeah, yeah.
Which was one of the things that blew my mind as an adult when I said something to him about it
How
and
is
how
that
horrible it was.
possible?
How is it possible? Did I make it up? Was that, did he block it out? Like, what happened?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, like, I'm saved from being the thought that I'm crazy, but my mother does remember it, but I did remember it. But, um, yeah, it is
My little
the
brother
way
and I
we
are
perceive things.
are Irish twins. We're
Oh,
we're
okay.
we're 15 months apart and
Oh, okay.
raised very much like twins in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
And so we shared, let's say through junior high school, we shared almost every experience together.
sure.
And we'll get together and he'll say, "You remember when we
Steve?
did such and such?" And I'll go, "Not a clue." "No, but it was with so and so." "I don't know who that is." and
Yeah.
you know, and we
Or you
were,
remember things completely differently, or
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But and then I'll say, "You remember the thing?" And he'll say no. So yeah, there's no telling who's gonna remember what.
There's really not, yeah.
Yeah.
And we're back to the thing that we mentioned earlier about how just because, and I don't know if it was on here or on text, but that just because you get the outcome you wanted still doesn't even guarantee that you got it for the right reasons.
Tell me more about that.
So, well, we were talking, I guess it was in text, that somehow the topic, because of a story about your daughter in one of the other podcasts, not calling you anymore when she forgot something at home that
Oh,
she
yeah,
needed for
yeah,
school,
yeah. Because
and
I wouldn't rescue her
right, because you
for
wouldn't rescue her,
forgetting.
and I thought my question at the time that I didn't bring up was, well, did she not call you anymore
All
because
right.
she became more responsible, or did she not call you anymore because she realized dad's not the person to call in that situation? And then it came to, well, like crying it out, which is, one of those big hot topic things
Oh,
when you're
for
on
babies.
parenting boards for babies. Do those children stop crying because they have learned the skill of self-soothing, or have they stopped crying because
How
they have
they
learned that nobody is going to come for them and it is a waste of their energy?
how,
Like,
how does a newborn learn to self-soothe? How the
well, they don't.
how
I mean,
they
the
don't.
research
It's
is
not
the research
possible.
is clear. No, they learn to soothe by being soothed.
Yes.
And right. So the studies actually show that babies that are held, who are attended to when they cry 75% less than babies who are left to quote self-soothe. But the point being,
I'm so
I
shocked.
know, I know. But the point being that just because we get the outcome we want of our child not crying anymore or our child sleeping through the night does not mean
Mm,
that that outcome happened for the right reason.
very good point.
So,
Very good point.
yeah, and so in a way we have to really commit to not being attached to the outcome, because the outcome doesn't mean
Right.
everything went right.
So for example, when your objective was peace in the home, could have been
Yeah.
achieved through complete domineering and scathing, just total
Hmm.
um,
Tyranny.
tyranny at the dinner table, for example.
Hmm. Yeah.
But that doesn't mean it was peaceful. It was just quiet.
Right, exactly. Well, and I did attain peace, but I did it even so through not necessarily healthy means on my own part.
Okay.
In that I sublimated my own feelings for so that everybody else could have their say, and I just took myself out of it because that made peace more difficult when I put my own wants and desires on the table as well. So yeah, I mean, we can absolutely, like, I achieved the outcome that I wanted, but I did it in a way that was so uncomfortable that it was only, I could only take about 10 years of it,
Hmm.
um, before it was like, okay, yeah, enough of that. Let's fuck peace. Let's get some truth in here. So it
And we talked about nice guys.
yeah,
Well, one of the things that nice
fuckers.
guys, one of the things that nice guys do is they get super attached to outcomes in the dating
Yeah,
world
yeah,
really early. First date kind of shit,
yeah.
and I've read rants from men on Facebook who were like, "The fuck, man, we had this date and I she ordered all this expensive food and
Mhm.
wine, and I spent all this money and time, and then she didn't want to see me again. What the fuck? Well, yeah, that's what dating is. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
but we started our first podcast, darling, with you saying, but these women who only gave me one chance, they never got a second chance to see if they were wrong.
yeah. Well, and I find some of that was, it, I'm not backpedaling, honestly.
No, I
I'm
know.
not
I
covering
was
my
just
tracks.
thinking what a pain in the ass my memory is, so that I can be like, well, wait a second. That seems to contradict what you said 7 years and 2 months ago. Yeah.
We are never having an argument.
No, we're probably not. We're perfect communicators.
um, oh, my complaint, if you will, was simple disappointment in that
Yeah.
they weren't willing to explore beyond a snap judgment.
Well, and actually, what I came away from that with was how disappointing it would be to me if all of those people, it was like, well, if I'm not going to date you, then I don't even want to talk to you. Like, I mean, when you and I met, it was like, well, I didn't want to date you, but you were still an interesting person, and I still enjoy spending time with you.
Hmm.
And so, I mean, to me, it was just like, well, that's kind of like they just really lost out on a good opportunity by virtue of, I don't want to date you, so X. But,
Right.
I am also
And
imagine you weren't doing the nice guy thing of having an outcome in mind of every single woman you went on a first date with falling in love with you and being your true love forever and ever and always.
that would be a lot of true loves. I don't think I have room for that many.
Gonna need to eat your Wheaties.
No, I was not attached to outcomes, but I became disillusioned with the rapidity with which women would move on.
Mm.
Um, there have been one or two that I have stayed in touch with on a a friends basis, but not very many.
Yeah,
They have some different kinds of objectives that I can't fathom,
I think
and
perhaps they are attached to a romantic outcome.
I think they
Um,
are attached to a fairly specific type of romantic outcome during the
sure.
first date. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah,
That they want a certain kind of emotional reaction, and they either if they don't get it, then we'll see you later.
yeah.
Um, which is, I think unfortunate. Um,
It is. But also, as we have determined, probably has absolutely nothing to do with you.
oh, I came to that conclusion.
Yeah.
How could it possibly? They don't know me enough
Yeah,
to reject
really.
me like that.
Nobody can really fully reject you in a way that's absolutely, undeniable until they've known you for a good long while.
That's right.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt when they just do it out of hand. They don't even know all the ugly shit yet.
they, it'd be so much more effective if they had a really good reason.
Yeah, if you would have waited a while, that would have actually bothered me. Oh well.
Oh
Oh
well.
well. What's our timer sitting at?
Oh, we are 120 almost.
Bye now.
It's almost New Year's.
It is.
No
Oh God.
resolutions. I don't do
No.
resolutions.
No, neither do I. I've got some ideas in my head of the direction I want to go, and I'm not saying them out loud because when I do, the universe spanks me. So,
Oh, you're superstitious.
no, I'm not really. It's just that I the last several years have taught me that my plans don't mean shit.
Well,
So I'm getting
so
so supremely unattached to outcomes, I'm not even going to attach myself to a process that might lead to an outcome.
I'm not superstitious. I'm only a little stitious. So, yeah. How do you have goals? This is a topic for another time. How do you have goals and not be attached to outcomes?
Mm,
We'll have to talk about that another time.
we will, yes. Get off the phone quick before I start answering.
Okay.
All
Fun.
right. Talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.